Hey friends, today's video is by request from Rob Byers. So shout out to him for asking about how I store, how I prep, how I load, unload, and how I maintain our coach. So let's talk about it. So you've got your rig in storage. If you're lucky to have an indoor storage, that's where the maintenance starts, at least for us. Now, this is by no way or stretch of the imagination the only way to do things. However, I think most will not argue that when it comes to storing your RV, indoors is the best. However, there are a lot of caveats to how and where you store this. So for us, for example, we don't have 50 amp. And it would really be nice to be able to have our rig plugged into 50 amp all the time. So the preparation for your long trip kind of begins right in storage. I maintain our rig on a continual basis in storage. So I make a trip at least every week, if not several times a week, to do those small things so that when it comes time to make a long trip, I'm not panicking or I'm not pressed into the last minute preparations, because we all know that before a big trip you've got enough to worry about, and all of a sudden worrying about a ton of maintenance issues or the little nitpicky things on your RV that you've kind of let go, that's not the time to do it. So I like to keep up on it. It's kind of like pulling weeds in the yard. If you keep doing it on a routine basis, they never get overwhelming. One of the things I'm going to talk about is how I keep my rig on charge. Now, most storage units that I know of have a real issue with plugs and GFI outlets and outdoor outlets, and they just are not reliable at all. So what I've done is I've shared the load between a couple different plugs. I use a plug on this bank and I use another plug on the other bank. It's not optimum, but I'm going to let you see how I kind of take care of things while the coach is in storage. So I have an onboard charger that I keep one of the outlets plugged into, and that's 110. And the other outlet I have plugged into this unit right here. This is a Victron Blue Smart charger. And it's a 30 amp charger that is capable of putting my battery bank into a float charge. I'm going to tell you right now, if you're running almost any load like a refrigerator, that battery charger has a hard time keeping up on a float. And in this particular case on a Newell, there's enough residual battery drain that float charger at 30 amps really has a hard time keeping up. And to be honest with you, it never really sees a float charge at any one given time. It's constantly pumping out energy because the coach is using energy all the time between the computer system, the electronics, and the refrigerator and the transmission. And I've been told that there's virtually no way of throttling down these Newells to the point where they're not taking up at least about 10 amps of energy. And that's on the house side. Now, I've explained this before, but I want to show you what I've done with these Anderson plugs. This is a mini Anderson plug, and I've spliced that in to a high quality cable from Better Cables USA, who puts out a high quality cable, and they were able to put this Anderson coupler on here, and then I plugged it in to the Victron, and this Victron has a Bluetooth connection to my iPhone, and it allows me to monitor the actual history on the charger. I maintain my batteries. I make sure that I've got a good topped off battery so I'm not caught by surprise when I come out here and try to fire the rig off and suddenly nothing's working, or worse, the house side is dead. Before I do anything else around the walkthrough, I look at my tires. I check the condition of the tires. I make sure that I don't see any one of the tires that looks abnormal or is lower on air. Although on these truck tires, it's very hard to tell without actually taking a gauge to them. For those of you who have a hard time with gauges that work or not, this is not a cheap gauge. It's not one of those AutoZone $3 models. This one is really super good. And I tell you what, for all these years, I have not used a product that has a quality like this for tires. I've used just standard dumb push gauges, but I'm telling you what, for a big rig like this thing is just unbelievable. It's from Tire Minder. It's the same company that does the actual TPMS gauges, and I bought this here a while back, and I've used it a bunch of times now, and I can't speak highly enough. It seems silly to rant about something simple like that, but when you have to reach into your truck stems, or you'll notice it has a backwards reverse chuck on it, but it seals so nicely, and it has a light on there if you need to use that. It just works really well. I'm not sorry I paid the money for it. It runs on 2 AA batteries, so easy to replace. I have TPMS sensors, so I depend on them to give me an accurate reading when I start the coach up. But the admonition there is to make sure that you check them when they're cold. So once again, it starts in storage. Before I move this coach back to our home to start packing it up, I make sure that I'm checking my tires when they're cold. Now, I like to monitor the electrical source from home or on the road when my coach is in storage. So let me show you a little bit of a hack job that I've got using technology. This is a Nest outdoor camera. For those of you who don't know it, the Nest actually has a monitoring system where if a Nest camera loses its power, it sends an alert to your Nest app on your phone. So I got to thinking, that's a pretty good way, because that Nest camera is plugged in to one of the circuits. So if that Nest camera loses its power, guess what? I get a signal that tells me I've lost power. The other thing is, I came up with this idea. You'll notice I use lighted extension cords. I have one here too. Those are both on different circuits. So when I log on to the Nest app, I can check that camera that's pointing down, as you can see, at those 2 extension cords. Voila, there you have a hack electrical monitoring system. It's not perfect, but the fact that I can log in and actually see and check that, make sure that the cords are actually lit, tells me at least I have power. And I rely on the Nest camera going offline to tell me if it in fact has lost power. So it's a workaround. It's not the best, it's not perfect, but I also have the My Rosie app that's integrated into our coach, and that gives me the ability to set alerts whenever my voltage drops down. So that's a backdoor way of knowing I've lost charging, is when my batteries start dropping down. And I'd like to beat it to the punch. I don't want to wait until the batteries drop down before I actually tackle the problem. Part of routine maintenance is looking underneath your vehicle. So you want to look down underneath to make sure you don't have any fluids. Storage is the perfect place to start that. Look for radiator fluid, transmission fluid, oil, hydraulic fluid, and make sure that you don't have any puddles underneath your coach. Here's the place to look for it, not when you drive it back home to pack. If you did have a leak of some sort, it's a lot better to check it in storage and leave it here than it is to drive it and potentially cause some damage. If you leave it in storage, at least you can have it worked on before you cause damage by driving it home. There's quite a bit of controversy of how often do you start your diesel engine, how often you start your generator. Well, I'm not getting into that argument. I'm just going to say that the best practice from where I came from in the fire service is we started our engines and generators and saws and all those motors that didn't get exercised on a daily basis. We started those once a week. Now, some would argue that they can leave a diesel tractor parked out in the field for 2 years and go out and fire it up. Well, I don't really think that's what we all want to do with our diesel engines that are powering our RVs. So my practice is I like to check it at least every month. Preferably, I would like to start the rig and the generator every 2 weeks. You keep things running, keep things warmed up, keep it aired up so that the system is exercised. And that also gives me a chance to air the system up, check the airbags, check the leveling, and check all those things once again so I'm ready to go when it's time to pack for the trip. One of the things that will affect generators is moisture that gets into the electronics and the stators inside the generators. I know of people that have been in the very, very humid climates who've let their generators go too long without being warmed up and dried out, and they end up having problems with their stators because everything kind of gets corroded in that moist salt air. All right, now from a distance, take a look at your coach. When you have a leveling system such as we do, I want to look at it and I want to make sure my coach, after it's been sitting a few days, is sitting level. So that tells me that the automatic leveling system is working on a Newell coach. It's always enabled, and so it's always seeking level, and that's why it has a compressor that's always running. I don't panic if by chance my coach was sinking on one side. The first thing I'll do is I'll check to make sure that 110 volt compressor is running. Now, this is not an exhaustive maintenance list. This is merely a pre-trip check that I go through before I pull the rig out, and most of these items are going to be done before I even start the rig. So I'm just going to briefly talk about it. Once again, this does not replace your annual maintenance, periodic maintenance. This is basically a pre-trip check. I'm going to look for any obvious fuel leaks, oil leaks, or fluid leaks. That includes the hydraulic fluid, the antifreeze. That's the reservoir, and here's the actual tank. I look at my sight glass to make sure it's full. Make sure, as I did recently, that my radiator cap is not leaking. I look below everything to say, well, if there's a leak, I'm going to see it down here. Check the belts. Standard deal. Look for belts that are cracked. Look for particles that are in the belts. These are notorious. These Cummins mounted down low. The techs will tell you, make sure you watch, because sometimes you'll get rocks and debris embedded into your belt. So check those really carefully. Fuel separators, check your filters, look below them. And engine oil is tested when it's resting, engine off. Transmission fluid has to be tested when the engine is on. There is actually a level readout when you're on the Allison keypad up front. You can push the couple buttons and it'll cycle through and it'll actually do a fluid check for you. So I use that. I'll leave the hood up, and when I start the rig, I'll come around and I'll check everything as the engine is running, and that just kind of gives me another eyes on when things are running. I check things that are supposed to be spinning to make sure they're spinning and rotating, and you know, look at the fan, look at the belts. I just make sure that everything looks like it's in order and nothing's wobbling or making noises. Some of these things you cannot hear once you get in the cab. You start your motor up, you close the hood, you're not going to hear a noise that could alert you to a potential problem. I would be remiss if I didn't caution folks out there to check these turbo coupler clamps, because Newell does a good job. They double clamp all theirs, and these have spring tensioners, but these can get loose over time and you can have a boot leak. And I've had a couple that have had significant leaks, and unfortunately the one that leaked was way in the back. And let me tell you, that was the hardest one to actually get tightened down. Luckily, I didn't have to do it. The guys at Cummins had to do it for me. All right, in terms of keeping the rig clean, well, there's no easy way. Aside from you parting with your money and having your rig detailed every time you get to a campground, we all know that's not always possible. Either your campground has restrictions on washing, or detailers just aren't to be found. So I carry the necessary products to keep my rig clean. This is how I store them. Obviously, everything that has a dual purpose is a win when it comes to storage. But in this bucket, I have my washing equipment, and that includes this, which is my go-to spray down for the rig. It's basically a detailer. It's a waterless detailer, and that's combined with this neat little product here, and this is called the Wash Wax All Mop. It has a wet side and it has a dry side. And basically what you do is you spray the wash Waxall onto the wet side, and that enables you to go and wipe your rig down and then flip it over. This comes from the aero industry. They do airplanes and jets with this. That's where this comes from, and it does a really good job. You need to get an extendable pole. Get one that is capable of being used in a wet environment. I used the one that they sell with this. It was a really nice pole. The problem is it's not rated for wet environments, so that's not a dual purpose, because I take this head off and I put a lamb's wool head on it so I can wash the rig down with soap. And after a while, it corroded the insides of that. I had to recently replace that with just a aluminum extendable pole from Ace Hardware. So this is a pretty neat product. Again, I bought it from Aero Cosmetics, and it's the Wash Waxall products. And of course, that doubles as a seat. Here I have a various assortment of microfiber towels, critical to keeping your rig scratch free. When I use them, I put them to the side, and I'll use that for basically a utilitarian purpose if I have other dust and things on steps and whatnot I need to wipe down. But once I use it on the rig, it either goes to the side or it goes into a trash bucket right behind. And when I get to a place where I can do laundry, I'll go ahead and give those things a good clean. Standard old roughneck, and it's got a number of different replacement mop heads, so I'll always rotate these out. When you get it really dirty on your wet side, you put this on the dry side, and you put the old dry side onto the dirty side, which is the wet side. So it's just a rotational basis, kind of like tires, and that keeps everything cycled through nicely. So they give you a good assortment of extra. This is a small little scrub pad and a small mop, and this works great on the windshield. Now, here's the little secret. I have people come to me at the campgrounds all the time and ask me, how the heck do I get all the bugs off of my windshield? Well, I keep a sprayer with bugs and all. When the coach is in storage under this heat that we've had lately, I try to keep all these things sealed up, because by gosh, if you don't, you're gonna come out here and you're either gonna have a leak or it's gonna be evaporated. So this stuff is about the best you can get out there. It's an enzyme-based product. It's called Bugs and All by ProSol. You can get it on Amazon. There's another product out there I know Andrew Steele talked about that he uses, and he said these are both about the same. But the bottom line is it's an enzyme-based cleaner. It won't damage your paint. What it does is it's designed to eat away the bug guts. And this is concentrated, so this is a half cup to 32 ounces of water. So you put 4 ounces into that bottle, and you've got enough to do several window cleanings. In that kit, they give you a hand scrubber. So again, washing down and scrubbing all the bug guts off the front bonnet. This comes in real handy for the low spots, but by and large, there's really not too much I can't get done with this. And these are great because they tear off, and you can toss them in the washer along with the microfiber and get them all nice and clean. And these are held on just with Velcro. So it works great. It's a good little product. And I've been using it now for 3 years, and so they're holding up nicely. The latest detailing liquid that I'm using is now this. It's the Bead Maker. It's from PNS. It's a professional detailer, but it does have SiO2, which is the newest, greatest thing. The rest of the stuff is basically about washing. This is the product, so you can see it. It's Aero Cosmetics Wash Waxall, and they do have a presence on Amazon. I think I bought their kit though directly from them, and they ship the whole thing. At minimum, if the rig is dusty, I'll do this on each stop. If the rig starts getting dirty, visibly dirty, like it's been rained on or there's a lot of road debris or mud, if it starts looking really dirty, I'm very hesitant to start mopping it down with a dry mop or even this Wash Waxall. I'll wait, I'll hold off and give it a proper washing, because you will scratch the rig. And even my professional detailer will say, look, if you're not taking care of your rig, even with ceramic, if you're not taking care of what you're using on the rig, you will scratch even ceramic coating. So you just have to be careful. Obviously, keeping things separate and clean is super important. That's why all of my products that touch my paint are pretty much in this separate bucket. The exception is what I'm sitting on, which is my wash bucket. That has my soaps, it has the tire spray, it has the wheel spray, and I really like that stuff. So let me give you a quick show of what that other product is. Now, I really like the shampoo from Adams. I use it in a foam cannon. This is the VRT vinyl rubber trim coating. It has a little bit of UV protectant, and it goes on very dry. And this is tire rubber cleaner, which is magic from Adams. This cleans off your tires like nobody's business, and I highly recommend that stuff. It really makes cleaning those big giant truck tires super easy. So this is a foam cannon. This plugs into the end of the pressure washer, and these things are magic. You need to have them. It covers the rig with foam. You can look at them online and you'll be able to see the advantages of them. It's a must-have, especially for those who have a pressure washer. They do have versions that go on a hose end. They're usually called foam guns, and they don't do nearly as good of a job producing foam as these do. These need pressure, high pressure to work, and you can dial the amount of foam up and down. You can also change the fan pattern on this, and you do want to use that with the good car shampoo. It will make so much foam you won't believe it. This is the little baby pressure washer. There'll be more videos to come of that system, but it all fits in a nice little foldable container. It stays all neatly tucked away, and then I have my water utility tray right on there, so that keeps everything nice and tidy for when I hook up. I've got my spare washers, my quick connects, an extra filter, another pressure regulator, a couple adapters, and of course spare quick connects, and you've seen that video. So how do I organize my RVs? Well, this is the driver's side, and I kind of think about this as being the utility side. So all things concerning water are on this side. Of course, I have the wet bay on this side, so I keep my hoses, my connections, my regulators, my pressure washer, everything to do with water and washing is kind of on this side, as well as the ladder is accessed from this side. This tends to be buried at RV sites a little bit more. That's usually up against a wall or brush, and it's a little bit less friendly to get to, and certainly not head friendly for those of us who push the 6 foot level. This is something that you all want to develop and travel with. This, I've had several different iterations, and this seems to work out really well. I got this recently at Home Depot. It's compartmentalized, and I use it for all sorts of different parts. As you go along, you're going to not just only need spare parts, but you're going to have a lot of parts that seem to come off, and you need someplace to put them. So I really like having that segmented box, and it is one that actually holds tight and doesn't let the products leak, or I should say migrate from one compartment to another, because there's nothing more maddening than getting in there and finding out that all your washers have slipped underneath and gotten mixed around, and you can't find them when you really want to. At least you can't find them quickly when you want to. One of these things where I just can't travel without. I don't know why, but I really like these boxes of these rags. They're really, really super tough rags. Again, you can buy them at Lowe's and Home Depot, but man, they just last and last and last. There's 300 in there, but they seem like they go for a year. On the outside, I utilize the carpet to tack on some work gloves, utility gloves, in case I need to get to something and protect my hands. I find that as we pack for long trips, I need to have a potential space, because as we're traveling along, we're going to buy things like extra cases of water, sometimes bottles or cases of wine, and you seem to need always a spot to put this stuff in. So I recommend don't jam this stuff to the moon, because you're going to run out of room, and you're going to be looking around as you're traveling on these long trips for a place to offload some stuff, and you may not have that opportunity. Think about your trip as you plan it, what you're going to be doing at each stop, and thinking, is this a priority for me? This space goes away super quick. We always recommend having a airtight, sealable dog food container, because the last thing I want to do is in storage or out in the open have this smell or this dog food be a temptation for rodents or, God forbid, bears or something like that. We have a large box of towels. We've got a spare step down there. We've got mats, and then I carry a blower with me. This is multi-purpose, so this is great for blowing out anything from compartments to your steps, to your truck, to the bed of your truck, blow off your dog. But I originally bought these to keep the slides clean and clear. And these have proven invaluable, because sometimes I get up there when we're under a real dirty set of trees, you know, dropped leaves or dropped pine needles. What I think about when I'm planning for these long trips is, where will I be in between places that I can't get supplies? So if you're out in the boondocks somewhere or at a state park where you're not going to be able to have even an Amazon delivery, I think ahead. So again, it's a little individualized, but for example, one product that we like to travel with are the espresso pods, and you can't get those just anywhere. So I stock up on a huge supply before I leave home. Things like gallon water jugs, individual bottled water. You can never have too much of those, so we dedicate a lot of our storage for those long-term trips in which we know, hey, we've got a long distance between stores where we don't want to run low or out of drinking water. Frozen foods, frozen meats, things to keep you away from the stores for a long period of time. But quite frankly, we've been doing anything from 3 to 5 week trips on a very frequent basis, and we have yet to run out of anything with just a little bit of pre-planning to grab things that we know are difficult to find on the road. I always have a good supply of things to keep us safe on the road, from first aid to various medication and first aid supplies in case some emergency is going to happen and we're away from help. There are things like this that might be a little bit harder to find and order that you don't want to run without. For example, this is RV Digest It. These are the pods that go in your toilet, and this works good. It's a probiotic, so it's not just a deodorizer. It really works good. I've been using these now for about half a year, and I gotta say, I think they do a lot better job with dissolving the solids and keeping the odors down. One thing I'm starting to do is I'm starting to cover our drains. This may or may not help some people, but we've had a bad problem with heat in this storage unit this summer. And what happens when these coaches get hot is the water in your traps can evaporate. And that can really cause a stink problem, because now all that sewer gas is allowed to come through your trap, which is normally supposed to have water in it. So people have complained about why their RVs are stinky when they come inside. And sometimes it could be a problem where your shower trap or your washing machine trap or your sink trap have become dried out and allowing the sewer gases to come through. So I bought these silicone covers for the drains. I put one in the shower and one in the sink, because those are large diameter openings which will allow more evaporation. Something else you might want to think about are those things that you just can't do without even a night. And I'm talking about things like batteries, not just a remote control on your TV, things like remote controls, key fobs, door openers, awning, remote controls, specialty batteries. I carry a 9-volt for the smoke detectors. One thing I can say about clothing is it's dependent on your accessibility to getting laundry done. Think about the distance or the time period in which you can go without clean clothing or clean linens or bedding. I plan out, okay, well, I want to have clean socks, clean underwear, clean shirts for 5 days between these stops, so that when you do get dirty, you can just rotate these out and store them somewhere until you can get to the laundromat in the next city, or when you get back on full hookups, you can do your laundry. Well, hopefully this video helped you with some thought processes regarding longer trip planning. Again, there's so many variables that one size doesn't fit all. So if you have any comments, questions, suggestions, please feel free as always to leave them below, and I really appreciate you watching and subscribing. Take care, safe travels. And last but not least, before we close everything up, Alexa, Lightmaster off.
Okay.
See you next time.